So, welcome to the Inquiring Cat Does Politics Saturday rant on the 19th of April 2025. So, we'll start with Mr. Trump in America this day. And it's quite interesting. David Lammy, our foreign secretary, when he came back from meeting Trump at Mar-a-Lago, said that he found him very gracious and pleasant to be with. Now, you could say that was just realpolitik because we're trying to get a trade deal with America and we daren't say anything against a man who is notoriously petty and vengeful and sensitive to criticism. But Bill Maher, who you may or may not know of, he's an American political satirist come comedian. I quite like his funny bits on the Facebook that crop up. He was invited to go and have dinner with President Trump to get on a get-to-know-you sort of basis. Trump has said 30 obnoxious things about Bill Maher in public before the event. And so Bill went there with an open mind, he says, to go and see what was it like to meet Trump, Bill being a liberal and against a lot of what the Trump administration is doing. And to cut a long story short, it's quite interesting because to the dismay of some of the far left liberals, Bill Maher reported back that, in fact, he found Trump, like Lammy found Trump, to be gracious and humorous and open-minded and inquisitive. And he rounded off his analysis by saying, why can't he be like this in public? Because his public persona is so different to the private man that I met. Well, I think there's an answer to that, Bill. And that is that Trump knew that you would be going back on air to give a review of the meeting, and he wanted you to say nice things about him. And at the end of the day, he's little more than an actor, and he was just making sure that he would butter you up and make sure that you gave him a nice review, because ultimately you have to judge the man by his actions. And his obnoxious behaviour. I mean, this week, another petty thing. Some CNN journalist in the Oval Office asked a question, and Trump lambasted her, rejected her question, and said, and nobody's watching CNN anymore anyway. I mean, it's just so ridiculous. This sort of petty, childish comments he always comes out with. We kind of learn to ignore them. But now he's talking about walking away from Ukraine peace deal or negotiation. This is remarkable for a man who said he could stop the war on day one of a presidency. But in fact, what he's doing is the minerals and oil and gas deal with Ukraine on a purely transactional business basis, and it's tantamount to extortion. And poor Ukraine is hoping that having some American mining interests in their country will see them get some degree of protection. But I think that, in fact, Trump will end up doing a deal with Putin so that he carries on getting the mining extractions come what may. It's a complete betrayal. The other interesting thing that's come in America, of course, is this poor chap who's been deported to an El Salvadorian criminal jail, which is really horrendous, the circumstances we see from inside there. I don't have too much pity for genuine gang members who've been slaughtering people left, right and centre, who find themselves ending up there. But this man was actually specifically banned from being deported, and Trump's henchmen did it anyway. What's really interesting is that the Supreme Court has said he's got to be brought back. Now, this is the Supreme Court that, of course, Trump appointed the majority Conservatives onto to give him the majority, and he's just ignored it. And he's now playing this silly word game when he was in the Oval Office with the head of El Salvador. And he said, well, I can't send him back because he's in El Salvador. And the guy in El Salvador said, well, I can't send a terrorist back into America because I don't have permission. This is a man who's never been accused of terrorism, by the way. His only crime I can find on the internet is that his wife, some years ago, reported him for domestic violence, and that all got sorted out. So we don't know actually whether he's guilty or innocent of anything, but he's innocent until proved guilty. And it's disgusting that Trump is ignoring the will of the Supreme Court. Now we will wait and see whether the three levers of power in America really work, and whether or not Congress and the Supreme Court can bring this issue to a head. Because I personally think that what Trump is doing is testing the will of the Supreme Court. Because if down the road he wants to run for a third term, which of course he will want to, then if he's found that he can make the Supreme Court go away, he will carry on regardless. So rather like Bill Maher, I actually have always said, way back in Trump 1, that Trump did two really good things in his first presidency. One was holding NATO to account and making everyone cough up more money across Europe, quite right too, and some countries are still laggards and need to do more. And the other good thing he did in Trump 1 was to start to hold China to account, because for years, I mean decades now, you've not been able to open a business in China without a Chinese partner, 50-50 partner, or even 51%, I think, for the Chinese partner. And of course, they've been learning all our patents and secret technologies for years and copying them, and now bashing out copycat items cheaper. So, the other thing with Trump, well, yeah, I mean, I think woke went far too far. That was another thing that was crazy. So there's some things I can sympathize with, but overall, his behavior is not one of grace and humor, even if Lammy and Bill Maher found that when they met him face to face. I think he's very, very dangerous for the world. So there we go. The situation in England, well, I said last week that I thought that Reform might well be a busted flush because of their association with Musk and Trump, who are so utterly derided and reviled here in the UK by the vast majority of people. The local elections are coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and it looks like Reform are going to do rather well. That doesn't necessarily surprise me, particularly in some of the industrial areas where they are putting a lot of effort into winning local election seats on the councils. That doesn't commute into a national success 4 years down the track. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge before then, and still this charge into the local elections is fundamentally being led by Farage and his personality and charisma, and the rest of the team not far, or rather far too far away. Lee Anderson has a little bit of profile, Richard Tice less, and beyond that we couldn't think of anybody who works for Reform. So I'm not overly worried that Reform are going to make too much progress in the national election, even if they do a bit of barnstorming performance here in the local elections. Time will tell. Anyway, to my friends in America, I wish you well, and I hope that we can restore normal relations in the not too distant future, because I don't think people in America who are the MAGA fans really understand quite how negative the view of your beautiful country leadership is from this side of the pond. And it's very sad. You could say, well, who cares? It's America for Americans, and what some silly old Brit thinks about it is neither here nor there. Well, it does matter, actually, because we don't get a hand in your election, but what we do suffer is the consequences of whoever is in the White House. And there is talk that Trump, in doing his trade deal with the UK, is going to insist on us watering down things like our minority rights, online protections, things that affect American companies in the tech world operating here. Well, if he's going to start leveraging our domestic policy as part of a trade deal, I think that if the whole thing goes for discussion in Parliament, there might be a great deal of opposition, because this is sort of strong-arm tactics, otherwise known as a mafia shakedown. What a load of mess this is. Anyway, there we go. That's our observations of the politics of the week. And I hope that next week we might find some good news. Cheers for now. Have a great week. Bye-bye from the Inquiring Cat Does Politics.